Missed an episode of your favorite podcast? Choose from over a decade of content in our archives, not just the latest episode. All free at GCNlive.com.
This is your call to action. Get prepared, America. Economy, survival, energy, disasters. This is USAPrepares.com. Informative radio, educational radio. Interact now by emailing instructor@USAPrepares.com or text at 434-390-7953. Class, please take your seats. Now, your instructor, Vincent Finelli.
Everyone all set? Cocked? Locked? Here we go. Dial sit correctly to USA Prepares. Thank you for being in class with us today. You know, just before the broadcast, Nathan said, Dr. Richard Allen Miller's connected, and I said, attaboy. Now, why did I say that? Well, when I was in banking, if someone did something really, really good, and it was difficult to do, and they had problems doing it, the Human Research Department had they had a rubber stamp, and it was about 8.5 by 11, and it said, attaboy. They had another one just like it, said, attagirl. So if you did something really good, you'd get called down to Human Research, and they would present you with an attaboy. That's the best they could do. They couldn't give you a raise because there was no raises going on back then. But you could get an attaboy if you did something exceptional. And we had a little bit of difficulty connecting with Dr. Richard Allen Miller this morning, and 8 seconds before the broadcast, Nathan says, we have Dr. Richard Allen Miller, and I said, attaboy. And that's where that came from. So, well done. Thank you, Nathan. Welcome, Dr. Richard Allen Miller.
Good morning. That's a different kind of pitch that you normally. And here, I like how you do the wind up.
Yeah.
Yeah. That's a radio thing.
Well, normally, I hope this hasn't gone out on the air, but normally I connect right at the top of the hour. And there are 6 studios at Genesis Communications Network. And they're open. They're all in one room. And so the guys wear headphones, but they have overhead speakers so they can listen to what's happening. And I connect and I say, I'm here. Uh-huh. Yep.
Yeah.
I'm here. Anybody home? Hello? Anybody home? And so I think on purpose, the engineers enjoy watching me flounder or listening to me flounder, and they ignore me.
Where are the actual studios physically located?
They're in Minnesota. They're in Minnesota.
Uh-huh.
Yep. So when you connect, Dr. Richard Allen Miller, you're connecting to Minnesota, and so am I. And what happens is, in your case, the engineers would call you on the phone at top of the hour. And at exactly top of the hour, I'm connecting with the engineers, and I'm letting them know I'm here. And sometimes, they have fun ignoring me. And then so when it gets closer to broadcast time, I'm looking at an atomic clock here in the studio. So I know exactly what time it is, and I know exactly when we're going on the air, and I know exactly how much time we have left before we go live. And sometimes I'll say, as the clock is winding down to broadcast, that very second, and I haven't heard from the engineers because I think they're testing me to see what I'm going to do. I'll
realize, of course, the amount of technology involved connecting Missouri with Oregon and Minnesota. That in itself is staggering. And less than 100 years ago would have been seen as witchcraft. Psychic, talking, breaker, 17. Come on, that's ESP 100 years ago.
Mm-hmm. And well, to make it even more complicated, I have several screens in front of me. I have multiple computers running the studio here, and I have one screen to my left, which shows the connection. And I can look at the statistics that will show me, the latency, the jitter, the packets that we're sending across the internet from our studio here in Missouri to Minnesota. So I can watch that, and I can look at the delay. So right now, there's a delay between me and Minnesota of 63 milliseconds. So almost no delay. That's great. Sometimes I can see the delay at 1,500 milliseconds or 2,000 milliseconds. And what that tells me is there's, at 2,000 milliseconds, that's 2 seconds. So I have to, when I speak, I have to anticipate that it's taking 2 seconds for my voice to get to the network, and then it takes a little bit more time to get to the instructor. So I have to anticipate that so we don't talk on top of each other, because we could easily do that. So I have one screen that tells me that, and I can click a tab that will show me the audio metering. So I can look at the view meters on a digital display, kind of like the meters that you would see in a broadcast studio if they're analog. So I choose to have an analog style meter on the screen so I can watch the modulation of the signal coming from my studio to GCN, and I can look at the modulation coming from GCN to me. So that's one thing I can look at. Then I need to look at, the stories that we're going to be talking about, and sometimes I write my notes on a text file, and I put it in front of me. Sometimes I'll have a screen that will let me look at articles that an instructor may say, have you seen, or I'll do a little bit of research during the breaks, so I have the screen for that. And then I have a third screen that shows me the callers. So, for example, I see all the lines that when a caller calls in, I can see when that call started, how many minutes and seconds that caller's been on hold, and I have 3 buttons. I actually have 4 buttons, but I only use 3 of them. One button, and this is per line, and there are many lines. So I have one button that says hold, and I can click that with my mouse. I have another button that says air, which means put that person on the radio, live. And then another button that says drop. And then in the middle of those buttons, I have a box that lets the engineer who answers the phone, who says, good morning or good afternoon, hello, this is USA Prepares. What is your name, first name, and where are you calling from, and what would you like to talk about? And what he will do is he'll type in this box, Mark the Spark from Pennsylvania, and he wants to talk about the Veterans Affairs, or something like that. And so the minute I see that, I can see how long he's been on hold, and I can, at the right time, click the button that says air and put that caller on the air. Now, if the caller were to do something that I didn't like, I could do one of 2 things. I could put that caller on hold, and you wouldn't hear him until I released him, or I could hit the drop button and just disconnect the call. Now, why do I have that? Well, let's say a caller calls in and, wants to talk about something that's way off topic, and we've got a full class scheduled, and we don't have time for that. I can say politely, I really appreciate your call, but we're not talking about that now. You can call back another time. Or if the caller decided to go into a profanity-laced tirade, the second that happens, he gets put on hold. And then I make sure that I explain to him that that's unacceptable, and then I hit the drop button. But that's never happened. I've never had to do that. So, but other broadcasts, and let me just, since I'm sharing this with the class, I believe that other national broadcasters, now I'm not talking about anyone on Republic Broadcasting Network, nor am I talking about anyone on Genesis Communications Network. I'm talking about the guys that you see all over the AM dial or the FM dial. Okay? I believe they have callers who are scripted, and the caller may call in and say, hey, I just love you. You are the best. You know what? If it weren't for you, I wouldn't know how to think. So thank you so much for telling me what to think. And, boy, I would be so much trouble if it weren't for you. And then the host would say, well, thank you very much. It's just, wonderful. And then the caller says, well, let me ask you this. I really appreciate your position on such and such, but here's my question. And then the caller asks the question. And then that's the last time you hear that caller speak. So I believe it is set up to deliver a talking point. And then the host talks and talks and talks for maybe 8, 9, 10 minutes. They go into a break, but you never hear the caller again. I believe that kind of radio is scripted. And I don't believe anyone that's associated with me, nor GCN, nor Republic Broadcasting does anything like that. But I believe that the well-known names are more inclined to do that. I'm talking about the big, big, big names. Not the best names, just the big names. So does that make sense, Rick, what I just said?
Well, we're way more spontaneous, and especially today, because normally you call me, you lay down about 3 or 4 topics that you'd like to talk about, and then we never get back to them.
Yeah. Well, 6 years of that. I mean, why would we break?
That's usually how it goes. Today, Sandy called and said, you're running a little late. You'll be there shortly, and we'll just wing it. Well, that's all we ever did or do anyway, as I remember it. So, what is it you'd like to talk about today? I have a topic. Mm-hmm. Why is there so much Trump bashing? Trump's a buffoon and blah, blah, blah. But, I mean, really, he is. We've already discussed the fact that it's an embarrassment whom they are offering to run for president, the candidates you get to choose from. That in itself is an embarrassment. But why this moment, last week, there is so much Trump bashing? What is that about? Is it that he has polarized America more than any other president? Because it would seem to me that there is a wider schism today on his approval or disapproval of, as a president. I have never seen such lines being drawn. Is that the right word? Somebody is insisting to try to call me, and this is the 4th time they've called, and I won't answer the phone while I'm talking to you. And that is kind of rude because it's not even 8 o'clock yet.
We have a rule around here. Don't call before 9. I'm talking about not radio related, but don't call the house before 9 and don't call the house after 9. Other than that, it's okay. But we think it's rude also to call before 9 and to call after 9. We'll be right back. Dr. Richard Allen Miller's with us. Dr. Richard Allen Miller's with us. RichardAllenMiller.com. Ricky asked about Donald Trump. It's possible. And I've seen rumblings and I've seen articles on the internet about how if Kavanaugh is on the Supreme Court, Donald Trump may implement martial law. And if he does, the reason would be he would need to do that, according to some of these articles, that would enable him to arrest the traitors, the leakers, like Hillary Clinton and, Barack Hussein Obama and others of that ilk, and ultimately restore the United States to what it used to be. Where I'm talking about the 1950s and the 1960s, where we were proud to be Americans. During the Barry Soetoro years, the dark years of the United States, not because he was black, just because it was ugly to be an American during those times. People hated it. People were buying guns. They were afraid that Barry and the bandits were going to come to their house and steal their property. And he's had executive orders to commandeer whatever he wanted, or to take whatever he wanted, or whatever the government wanted. If they wanted to farm, well, they were going to take it. And he signed executive orders to confiscate communications, fuels, food, everything you could possibly think of. And, should there be an emergency or a need to steal from we the villagers. And people were afraid, and rightfully so. And Hillary, she's the gal who wants to steal your water. She wants to put a meter on every well. You're not getting my well. I mean, I bought and paid for my ground the hard way. I didn't steal money. I earned it the old-fashioned way. Paid taxes on it where due, that kind of thing. Of course, I don't like paying taxes. I'm one of the few people I think that would admit I hate paying taxes. I hate it. I'll do it because I've got a gun to my head. But if I had a choice, I wouldn't. I wouldn't volunteer to pay taxes.
I saw an article last week that actually did a study, and today we pay more taxes than we do on food and rent.
Food and clothing is what I read, but yes.
Food and clothing, yes. Food and clothing. Uh-huh. We spend more per year on taxes than we do food and clothing. That's correct. Now, that should be an alarm system going off on the over-regulation of things. And does that mean I'm a Republican or a Democrat? The whole concept of a republic and a democracy has been skewed to such a level that I can't even answer my own question anymore. And I don't understand what it all means. I'm trying to be a really good citizen, and I don't understand politics. I just am real good in a laboratory. And that's where I belong. I wouldn't dream of trying to. It's so convoluted that science, in that sense of it, is so much simpler. And yet, science and religion are basically the same cut from opposite ends as a closed system. And I'm looking at what's going on in our country right now, and the anger and the despair and all the key words that one would place that we would not be experiencing if we were at war. And I'm wondering why. And that's like, I'm a simple person in that sense of it. I'm not complex in terms of knowing, like when you just talked about the laws with Obama, I was familiar with Agenda 21 because that was in the headlines, but all the rest of this, I had no idea. I know that they have so many different laws today to regulate how they can have access to your sovereign ground, the property that you're supposed to own. That's why a lot of the people were moving to Costa Rica, because in Costa Rica, you have maritime law on your property. You can do pretty much what you want to do on your own land.
Yeah. And we're losing freedoms by the second. We're being spied on by the second through our cell phones. They're even spying on us with those signs that say, here's the speed limit, here's your speed in bright orange display. They're even having license plate scanners hidden in those machines. We'll be right back. Dr. Richard Allen Miller's with us. Rick, I mentioned that those machines that you see along the roadside that say speed limit 35, your speed, 32, 41, and it lights up as each car or light truck or vehicle approaches to let you know what your speed is. And, it's kind of nice, except you're being blasted with radar. And, that's kind of dangerous in itself. Or if you happen to be on the curve where that thing is pointing, your house, your business is being blasted with radar, a known cancer-causing frequency. But now what's happening is companies in California and the East Coast have been asked to develop a method of concealing additional equipment in these machines. So it was once, here's your speed, maybe you might want to consider slowing down because children are playing in this area or something like that. Speed limit 25, school zone, slow down as you pass because child may chase a ball in the road or something like that. It could be as innocuous as that. But now the equipment is being outfitted with additional capabilities concealed within the boxes, and that is the license plate reader. So now the machine, I'm talking about the big bad machine, the blue plague, if you will, the politicians, if you will, have agreed and requested that these machines be outfitted with license plate scanners that record and transmit who's going where and when. So not only when you go to the gas station to fill up your tank and use your credit card, they've got you on surveillance. They see you coming in. There's a timestamp and a credit card recording at the instantaneously transmitted to the credit card company that's authorized the use of your credit or debit card, so they know who's at the pump. They know that when you were there, they know what you bought and at which pump. And also, as you drive through town and you go through these radar speed detection boxes that tell you what your speed is, they also know your vehicle, who it's registered to, and the time and the direction of travel. They know all that. Now, all of this, I'm sure, is being aggregated into databases for use in the future. And if you watch television, you'll see, like even something as harmless as NCIS. They illegally search phone records. They track people through their cell phones. They want, where's he going? Oh, he's on Highway 57, and he's traveling east at 42 miles an hour, 52 miles an hour, that kind of thing. They are watching our every move, and I hate it. As a matter of fact, when I wash my vehicle, I don't have time to wash my license plates. And one day I left them out in I don't know what I was thinking. I've got a gravel driveway, and I left them out, and they got run over again and again, and now they're all banged up. It's a shame. Someday I'll probably have to replace them, but, they're all scratched and dented and banged up, and they don't look as good as they used to. And so, to prevent further damage, I don't wash them. I wash the rest of the vehicle, but I don't wash them because I don't want to damage them anymore. Rick, I don't like it.
Yeah, there's the invasion of privacy and the idea of profiling you so that now an AI, like a third-generation D-Wave, can actually, with just a little bit of data input, know what you're going to do 28 minutes before you do. They're already using this in crime detection in different cities. Chicago has 2 different barrios that are now using this as a preventive crime thing where they predict there's going to be a robbery at this corner within the next 10 minutes. They can do that.
I don't have a cell phone, but I think that this technology is absolutely brilliant. So the guy or gal who developed this needs an attaboy or an attagirl. And let me read this to you. This is on dailymail.co.uk. And there's an app for a cell phone. And it says, quote, "Hey Siri, I'm getting pulled over." iPhone owners now use new shortcut app in iOS 12 to automatically record cops. So a savvy iPhone user developed a way to record police using this Shortcuts app. It's called Police. The app is called Police. And users trigger it by saying, "Hi Siri, I'm getting pulled over," which will send a contact of your choosing a text. Pause your music and turn on Do Not Disturb mode. It sends, contacts your location and records video using the front-facing camera of your iPhone. Once users stop recording, it sends the video via text and uploads it to Dropbox. So what happens is now you can record how polite the law enforcement guys and gals are, the guys that wear those blue and black costumes, and they have guns, and they, interrupt your travels, those guys. You can now record them by saying, if you have operating system 12 on your iPhone, and you have this app called Police, you can say, "Hey Siri, I'm getting pulled over." And now your camera and your microphone will record what is happening and then send it to Dropbox.
One of the issues that I have in Oregon is the level of brightness of the police cars, blue and red flashers. They are so bad here in Oregon as they literally hurt your eyes. You can't look at them. They hurt. Why are they doing so bright? Well, they want to be able to be seen. The problem is it's a type of bullying. I don't know if you understand what I'm really trying to say. When
Absolutely, I do. Absolutely.
The brightness of it is actually, it hurts my eyes. Why?
There's nothing. Well, it seems obvious to me, Rick. I'll tell you what. Well, yes, I believe you're right about the bullying. But in our neck of the woods, not only is it blue and red, but white. So there's three colors, and the blue is piercing blue. The red is piercing red.
There's already a study that is out that shows that blue light is damaging your eyes, which means that I have a legitimate physics point on the changing their level of glare. And when I say that, I mean literally. Even the ambulances don't need that kind of thing. And they don't have it. It's the police cars that do.
I believe that.
I don't know about other states. In Oregon, it's terrible. I mean, it's so bad, you literally cannot look at the light. It hurts your eyes so badly. This is an indium bandwidth, and I can prove that it's damaging your eyes, literally damaging your eyes. I can prove that, which means, how dare them?
Now let's talk about this for a minute, Rick. So these lights are piercing, red, blue, white. So piercing that you can't think of anything else. If you're being pulled over by one of those guys, that light, I believe, overwhelms almost all of your senses. To the point where
it does. Yeah.
To the point where anyone who is being detained by the guys in costumes is unable to function at their normal level. I believe that. Though here's the second part of this whole thing: the serve and protect part of being protected when they're pulling something over. That's an argument. The second part of it is not. And why now more than any other time? That has led me down a rabbit hole of study, and I'm watching the level of relationship. You know, mostly the police here are not serving. There's few people that do this, but mostly it's about incomes and preying on certain kinds of behavior. And it isn't all of it. It's specific, like speed traps. And years ago, when the state police were going to set up a speed trap near Medford on the freeway, the newspapers would give you advance warning for the locals to let you know when the speed traps were going to be in place. Today, I can tell you up near Eugene, for example, Coburg, which is a little suburb on the outside, trolls, not patrols, they troll that whole corridor in Eugene, going through on I-5 specifically to fund their little town. And I have, there's nothing I can do about it. I remember one cop pulled me over, and I got a ticket for being 6 miles over. Now, that's generally an arguable one, and they'll throw it out of court because you can prove that the variances of speed limit and the type of tire you're using and the pavement is such that you have a margin of error in terms of your odometer or speedometer. And really, actually, it is. That's why it's usually 11 miles over before they start to
consider you speeding. But Coburg does not, and has a reputation in the state of Oregon as being a speed trap area outside of Eugene, and they patrol the Eugene area to support the small town. I had a judge once that I took all the way to Portland in challenge on that, and he got away with it because I had a mechanic in to say I can't find that.
Let's talk more about this when we come back. I've got some numbers. I've got some thoughts. I'd like to comment on what you've just said. Dr. Richard Alan Miller's with us. RichardAlanMiller.com. That's RichardAlanMiller.com. We're talking about costumes and guys and gals with guns in costumes. Dr. Richard Alan Miller's with us. So, Rick, I object to speed traps. I think the police, if they want to discourage speeding, they should make their presence known by just being in a black and white style police car that you can see, and people will see them and they can observe, and rather than sniping. And what happens here toward the end of the month or the end of the ticket contest date, the law enforcement types will be hiding where you can't see them. And I remember Janet Reno saying that, she gave us very good advice, and she said, if you see something, say something. And I know what she meant by that. She meant, like, if I see something dangerous, I should warn people. I know that's what she meant, because she said, if you see something, say something. So when I see, this is 100% of the time, when I see a police car sniping, I warn the oncoming traffic approaching the sniping police car that there's danger ahead. I warn them that they probably can't see this car and they might accidentally run into it. And I don't want anybody to get hurt. So I just flash my lights. On my turn signal, you pull it back and it flashes the high beams. So I flash my turn signal by pulling it back, flash the high beams, flash the high beams, flash the high beams. I give 2 or 3 flashes to each car that approaches within, let's say a mile or a mile and a half, to let them know that they might accidentally, run into this guy if he pulls out quickly, because it's dangerous. You can't really see these cars that are hiding. And to further connect the dots or put an exclamation point on this, I was at a gas station. I was filling up my tank in my truck, and there was this really nice, expensive, fully decked out SUV. I mean, brand new. It didn't even have dust on it. And 2 cops got out. And I said, wow, that's something else. Geez, wow. I was in awe of this. Had to be $60,000 at least. I mean, that's empty. That's without all the doodads and doomaflachis and, accessories that were in there. I'm not talking about the guns and all that. That's extra. I'm sure this thing was $60,000, and they just picked it up. And they were going to take it back towards St. Louis, where they were going to deploy this thing. And I said, wow, you can hardly see this is a police car. And then the guy who was there with his buddy said, oh, yeah, I'm the police chief, and this is called the Ghost Package. We got the Ghost Package. Is this cool or what? I said, wow, that's something else. Ghost Package. Okay? Now, let me fast forward. So we have caller ID here at the farm, and every once in a while we get a call that says, police. No kidding. And I know who it is now. And it's this guy who calls me and comments on things that we talk about. And he's very interesting. Seems like a really nice guy. I've invited him to be on the air with us, and he's declined every time that I invite him. And I say, you'd be really good. And he said, no, I don't think so. I said, no, you'd be really good. So I said, it says police on the caller ID. And he goes, yeah, I'm a cop. I'm a peace officer. So, well, okay. Do you listen to us on the radio? And he said, every day. Uh-oh. So he listens every day. And so I said, well, how do you feel about what I say about law enforcement? He said, you're absolutely right. I'm absolutely right. That's what he said. I said, well, another time he called, I said, do you have any friends at work? He said, not many. Not many. So there's probably one guy, and I've been saying that 99% of the cops make the rest look bad, and he just might be that 1% that's trying to do the right thing. And he hates writing tickets. He doesn't want to do it. I guess he's not going to win the contest, the ticket contest. So there's a cop who agrees with what I've been saying. Can you imagine that? Dr. Richard Allen Miller and I will be right back. And I've got some questions about physics. And I'm sure he's got a lot to say. RichardAllenMiller.com. Richard, A-L-A-N, Miller. Hour number 2 of USA Prepares. Thank you for being with us in class today. Dr. Richard Allen Miller's with us. Rick, you had mentioned speed and being stopped by the police for, speed over the limit. I want to mention something. Class, the old truck that I drive, that rust-colored Chevy truck, uses, initially it had a tire size of 245 75 R16. And I always, or almost always, whenever possible, I increase the tire size because I want more distance between the wheel and the road. I want more rubber there. I want more shock-absorbing rubber. So I always increase the size of the tires when possible. Okay, sometimes you just can't do it, but I do. I don't like these low-profile tires, these 55 series, 50 series, 45 series, 40 series. I don't like them. I like 60 or better. And so when I increase the tire size from 245 to 265, it affects the speedometer and the odometer. Now, if you divide it out, you'll find out there's an 8% difference between a 245 and a 265. That means that my engine, if it's in, let's say, top gear, it's an automatic transmission, so I'm going down the highway, my engine will be rotating 8% less than if I had the original size tires on it. That means my speedometer is 8% slow. That means if I do a mileage calculation and say, well, how many miles have I driven since I filled up the tank, and how many gallons have I used? And if I do that simple arithmetic, I'll get the number of miles per gallon. Let's say I get 20 miles per gallon. Well, I'd have to add 8% more to that because the odometer will be 8% slow. The speedometer will be 8% slow. And that really means I'm going 8% faster. So if my speedometer says I'm doing 55, I'm doing 55 plus 8% more. Okay? So keep that in mind if you do what I do. You might have to reduce the speed as it appears on your speedometer. But I do that because I think it's better. I want more rubber on the road. I want bigger footprint. I want a bigger tire patch. And I want more distance between my wheel and the road because the roads are pretty lousy. And I don't want to beat up my suspension any more than I have to. So I want the tires to take that pounding rather than have the suspension take the pounding because I can replace the tires easily. Any comments on that, Rick?
No, it's just that's why in a court of law they give you that 8% margin and why the police are supposed to presume that they're an error bar of 8%. And that's why to be pulled over when you're going 42 in a 35 mile an hour zone is highly questionable.
Yeah, and, I don't know if the guys in costumes can actually read, what it says on that display. I don't know. I mean,
well, there's this part of, if you want the physics of the way Doppler transducers work, you can also create an argument on impulse in terms of lowering. If you're lowering your speed or raising your speed, police can't measure that distinctional difference, and that creates a secondary level of error in the actual physical measurement. And I can go through a physics argument on that as well.
Well,
now,
let's do that, because what you're referring to, I believe, is average speed over a time or instantaneous speed during that time.
Yeah, it's called acceleration over velocity. And so when the police use a term, they are misusing it. And in a court of law, you can use that distinctional difference and win from a legal argument point of view.
Okay.
That's why the police normally, because of that loophole, will in fact always do something where you're at least 11 miles over the speed limit before they have an argument.
Now you know why, class. Look, I was thinking about this device I want to install on our plumbing system here at the farmhouse. And we have plastic plumbing. When I was growing up, we had copper plumbing. Copper plumbing replaced galvanized iron plumbing because of the galvanized plumbing would corrode, and it would leak, and it was a nuisance. So copper plumbing was really good, but copper became so expensive. Copper became so expensive that they took the copper out of pennies. So pennies don't have copper in them anymore. They look like they have copper in them. They're copper coated, but they really are not copper through and through. So when we plumbed our house, I used PVC and CPVC. And for the hot water, I used CPVC, which is rated for about 180 degree temperatures. And I used PVC for the cold water because it has a larger diameter for the same specification. So, for example, if you use half-inch plumbing, that's PVC, it has a larger inside diameter than half-inch hot water CPVC plumbing does. So anyway, we use that kind of plumbing exclusively throughout the house for potable water. But I'm interested in your thoughts on magnetizing that water. So I have this device which will pulse at a specific frequency, magnetic pulses through a coil of wire. So let's say I have this 10-foot length of wire. Let's say it's 18 gauge, and I wrap it around the pipe, the plastic PVC pipe, and I power this device which pulses magnetic fields into the water, because the magnetism will go right through the plastic into the water and have an effect on the water. Do you think that there actually is an effect of magnetizing the water?
No, I don't. But that doesn't. Water is one of the very few elements that does not compress. And that's why water is considered, it has a complete transference of energy from one point to the other, almost perfect. And that's one of the reasons why water is so dangerous in a wave, because the larger the wave, the more energy is going through there. It doesn't compress like air does. Doesn't compress like other liquids might. Doesn't, when it freezes, it actually, in fact, does the opposite of what you think it would do. It expands slightly. And so electromagnetic fields are changing the structure in the water, but it does not, as a rule, compress.
Well, okay, so if
that's one of the wonderful things about water, and the bad things about water. It doesn't compress.
Well, if you look at the side of the road, let's say in West Virginia, where they have lots of rock and they've blasted through the rock to create, a flatter road, so the road doesn't go up these steep hills, and they kind of smooth out the height of some of these of the ground, so they put roads in so we can drive on them. You'll see that there's lots of rock falling off, these blasted through areas. And it's water that gets in these crevices of the rock, and then temperatures plummet, and the water expands and breaks off the rock. So if I had a big rock and I wanted to make two halves rather than have this one big rock, I could drill a hole in that rock, or drill a couple holes in that rock. Let's say the rock is 3 feet tall. I drill down about a foot with a 1/4-inch drill bit, fill it with water, and when it freezes, that rock may split. Is that right?
That's right.
Mm-hmm. Enormous power that water has.
That's a rare property of water. Most things, when they get colder, they contract. Water does not. It's one of the very few molecules that expands when it gets colder. And it's very rare. The amount of expansion is low, but it's enough to take and crack rock. That's one of the ways they do it. And
from my early physics class, I learned that water is the only material that expands when it's heated and expands when it's cooled.
Well, right? Gases, the gas part of liquid, gas, and solid, that part of reality is air pressure and so on. But the heating and expansion part is quite different than the freezing part, where everything expands usually when you heat it. When you cool it, water expands slightly, and that's why we have, icebergs, where it broke off the ice.
Mm-hmm. And okay, if we apply a magnetic field to water, can we make water wetter?
Wetter. Yes and no. It depends on what you're defining by wet. Whenever water touches anything, it restructures itself. And that is why the surface of a wave is moving faster than the wave itself, because of the H3O2 part of water when it touches there.
All right, Doc Ram's with us, and I've got a question about Antarctica. And it seems like there's some cosmic rays that are spewing out of Antarctica. Let's talk about that when we come back. Dr. Richard Allen Miller's with us. Rick, scientificamerican.com says there's something mysterious coming up from the frozen ground in Antarctica, and it could break physics as we know it. Physicists don't know what it is exactly, but they do know it's some sort of cosmic ray, a high-energy particle that's blasted its way through space into Earth and back out again. But the particles physicists know about, the collection of particles that make up what scientists call the standard model of particle physics, shouldn't be able to do that. So there are low-energy neutrinos that can pierce through miles and miles of rock unaffected, but high-energy neutrinos, as well as other high-energy particles, have large cross-sections. That means that they'll almost always crash into something soon after zipping into the Earth, and never make it out to the other side. So the scientists and researchers are puzzled by what is coming out of Antarctica. Have you come across that?
I'm looking at it right now on the Ice Cube Neutrino Observatory. I don't actually. Neutrinos are elementary particles, parts that can, well, they are sub-elementary particles. That means a neutrino is part of what makes up and a neutrino is essentially, or was at one point, considered massless. It was like light, didn't have a wave or a particle component to it. It was one or the other. Now I'm looking at this, and I'm going to try to odd pattern. It's an ice cube is a neutrino observatory. What they're using that for, it's like another way of looking at space. The fact that Antarctica is having anomalies, it is in itself an anomaly. There was, when I was there in the early 70s, besides the so-called Nazi base and the Viking base I saw, there was a hole that was in Antarctica that we were unable at that time technically to be able to go down into it. It was a large hole that went straight down into the mantle 100 miles. Now, we didn't have anything that could move vertically up and down like that 100 miles at the time in the 70s, and so it was an unknown. Then Buzz Aldrin, others apparently visited Antarctica, heads of state. My guess is, and I don't know, there was some technology where we were allowed to be able to at least send drones or something down that hole, because to go vertically 100 miles, do you know of any vehicle that'll do that? I don't. And it's from a physics point of view, at 100 miles down in the metal, that is verging on plastic, where rock becomes liquid and like a form of plastic, or malleable. And to maintain a hole like that, the physics of it is beyond anything that I'm aware of in current physics. Now, with that said, what's going on? And then there was the conspiracy news of immediately Antarctica was evacuated. And I remember when all of this was happening a couple of years back, heads of state were visiting Antarctica. I think they were showing off what they had discovered, and then they had a way to go down into this hole. And my guess is something was in stasis and woke up. Now, what would that be? Well, the so-called biblical watchers, the Anunnaki and the so-called Nephilim, I don't know. What I do know is I saw the hole. And what that might represent, physics point of view, I have no idea. But
I'll tell you what. We come back and we talk about turpentine and what your thoughts are on people consuming turpentine as a cure for maladies. We'll be right back. Dr. Richard Allen Miller's with us. Rick, and I've been reading stories about turpentine. I even met someone who was promoting drinking turpentine as a cure for colds and digestive system, as a digestive system cleaner. And there are people who are promoting, drinking turpentine. I've got some serious concerns about that. What do you have any thoughts?
Should. And yes. Okay, so turpentine is it's a class of chemistries. They're called terpene alkaloids, and I've spoken about them a lot. You'll find them in a lot of plants, mostly in pine and conifer. They will actually make turpentine, which is paint remover, if you will. But terpene alkaloids actually are an antifungal, antibacterial remedy when used properly. This is the key word here. Now, essential oils like lavender, oregano, juniper berry, making gin. Yeah. The one I have always used was wormwood. I like to deworm my body, myself, from H. pylori, T. gundi, that's another real creepy one from cats. A little mind bender, I believe, is how they qualify that, because the actual, when a cat comes up and puts its mouth next to your nose and purrs, you have just thoroughly been inoculated with T. gundi, which is a little mind bender. If it gets across the blood-brain barrier, it breaks your mind down. And these are worms that are historically, every country except the United States has a deworming protocol. I like to drink absinthe. That's a good way to do it. The primary way to do it with turpentine is to boil the frog. I would use wormwood. That has terpene alkaloids in it. Taking it orally is not the primary way it's used, but I'd take boiling the frog is where you take a single drop in a glass of water the first day, 2 drops the second day. By the 10th day, you now are taking 10 drops a day for the next 10 days, and you will deworm yourself in a 28-day period. You probably don't need to do that again for at least another 2 or 3 years. That's called boiling the frog. You sneak up on it, and before it's too late, the bacteria cannot evacuate or change, and you've cleaned your body out. Primarily, turpentine or terpenes, the terpene alkaloids, are used on horses, especially high-end horses that have abscesses, usually on their hooves. Same thing with your feet. If you have, what is that called, a gramatophyte, where your toenail is gone colored, brown under the toenail, that is a fungus inside between your toe and your toenail. And it is something that they try to get it from the inside out, where they go through digestive processes. You can simply soak your feet in, changing the pH will do it, like apple cider vinegar. That will clean your feet up. But with racehorses and other things like that, where there are multiple parasite issues working in a horse stable and places like that, you have T. gundi, yeast, helicopter bacteria. Oh, man, the list goes on and on and on. Eczema. It is all the same. It's bacterial related. Terpene alkaloids will go in and clean that out. Now, you need to be kind of careful, because it's also a toxin. It's a toxin to a lot of things, not just bacteria and fungi. And so it goes in and kills lots of things. That's why we use it, is terpene alkaloids. Wormwood is the most common one that's used in Europe, but you can use turpentine. You must thin it down. What they have is a thing called Venice turpentine, that when you mix it with DMSO, it removes soreness and a pack, usually on your ankle or the horse's ankle. That is what normally works. To be drinking turpentine, that's crazy. That's crazy. But if you use extremely small quantities of it in a more organized, boil the frog kind of thing. And when I said tincture, a tincture is to be distinguished differently than an essence or you see, each one in my book, The Potential of Herbs as a Cash Crop, I talk about the different concepts of what an essential oil is, what a tincture is, an essence, and a poultice. They're all different in percentages, and it's low percentages. Tincture is usually 10%, That means a drop of wormwood, for example, it contains 10% wormwood in that single drop. That's how little you're taking. And when you put a single drop in water, drink it. The next day you drop 2 drops in. That protocol will eliminate worms in your body. That would include those terrible worms that you would get from a cat when it purrs up next to your face. And I would say that at least 60% of humans are infected because of their relationship to cats. And that's what that T. gundi originally evolved in a cat where it will infect the mouse so that the mouse does not have a fear of the cat. And it makes the cat able to control the mouse more easily in its capture. It's an interesting process. I have written about it under mind control, and T. gundi is a mind control parasite. And so there's your reason to deworm yourself right out of the gate, not even talking about H. pylori, which gets into your... H. pylori is the one that makes it look like or makes you feel as if you have indigestion and an ulcer. And normally it's H. pylori because of the cleanliness of your water purifying plant. You won't get it out of a well, but if you have city water, like we do here in Grants Pass, everybody has H. pylori and needs to deworm themselves periodically. Now, that's the best I can do. I did some more online searching. That takes care of that, I hope. I was interested in this neutrino thing. This is interesting. What's I've just been reading about it. It's brand new for me. And what I would like to do, maybe we'll talk about this next week, where I do a little more research, because what Antarctica is discovering in the Scientific American article is kind of curiously interesting, and the implications are such. I'll tell you what I do know. The Earth has a lot of garbage in it. You know, right now with the solar minimum, the Earth is absorbing things that are going around the sun that would normally be absorbed by the sun are hitting the Earth. And it's causing the Earth to expand. And the expansion has got weird things in it. Let's talk about the Bermuda Triangle. Or there was a writer, Captain Cathay. He was captain of the New Zealand Air Force. And he wrote a bunch of books about anomalies on Earth called Harmonic 33 and 697, Harmonic 697, where he shows that these anomalies, like the so-called Bermuda Triangle or the Oregon Vortex, the Oregon Vortex was something that I studied for the military back in the 70s, where I had an interferometer that was proving that at 40,000 feet, it was bending light. Now, there's only one thing in nature that I know of that will bend light at that altitude, and that's called a mini black hole. And these so-called anomalies that have been absorbed by the Earth, by a little black hole running through space, and it hits the Earth and gets locked into, I don't know, the Oregon Vortex and Gold Hill, where you go at one end and the light's bent, so that you get this anomaly of light being bent, and you're shorter here and you're over there. How does that work? I don't know. What I do know is the Earth's got a bunch of phenomena like that all over the Earth, and a mini black hole in and around Florida may account for many of the so-called lost aircraft. I can run a very solid argument on how that might work with holograms, and the idea that it doesn't mean the airplane is gone, but if there's a balancing out of electromagnetic fields, well, you don't have the projection of force space. And now what's happening is you've got something else going on that we have yet to describe in physics. And space and time, all of that kind of thing, more interesting than turpentine, trust me. or at least for me, these concepts are now coming out every day as anomalies where people are now noticing fairies and fawn and elves everywhere. The so-called secret commonwealth. We're now discovering there's other universes interfacing with our own that we call reality. And that is going to be, there's a movie out, what is it, Will Smith did, called Bright, where he goes out and whacks this little pest fairy, kills it in front of a bunch of bikers, and then has a troll for his partner in a police car. That's a really good movie. But the truth of it is it's getting more interesting like that.
So, Rick, the boiling the frog that you talked about, we're talking about not consuming turpentine. Is that right?
That's right.
Okay. Class, we are not consuming turpentine.
But the terpene alkaloids that are part of turpentine.
Okay. We'll be right back. Dr. Richard Allen Miller's with us, class. And if you'd like to go to his website, it's richardallenmiller.com. Richard, A-L-A-N, Miller.com. And that's where you can peruse his offerings, buy his books, and they'll be signed. Dr. Miller signs each one of his books, and they're personalized. And if you'd like to add some of them to your library, as I have, it's really a treat. It really is. And so, Rick, the reason I mentioned turpentine is because there seems to be this craze, and I just want to make sure people do their own research, their own homework, before following the advice of an actress who says, turpentine is the cure for many maladies.
Lots of herbs contain terpene alkaloids. And it's got a certain kind of a smell, and the terpene alkaloids are antibacterial, antifungal. But that means they kill a lot of things, including you if you're not careful.
I'm glad you said that. And so that brings me to my next question. Colloidal silver. And a lot of us know about colloidal silver, and a lot of us have thought, well, maybe it'll work. Maybe I should consider trying it. How does colloidal silver know where to go? It kills bacteria. Does it discriminately kill only the bad bacteria? Does it kill all bacteria? Do we know how it works, Dr. Richard Allen Miller?
In one sentence or less, it's a heavy metal, and you can turn blue, literally, if you're not careful with colloidal silvers. Like all heavy metals, there is a good, a bad, and an ugly aspect of it. And again, it has, like terpene alkaloids, you need to know how to use it properly. Silver is a heavy metal. Silver in colloidal states behaves slightly differently than silver as a heavy metal. Silver as a monoatomic element behaves even differently than colloidal silver. The studies that have been done regarding bacterial decay using colloidal silver are extensive and are very promising. But again, one has to not be chasing windmills and rainbows. One needs to be doing a very solid research, keeping diaries on what it's doing to you. I have seen people that took that fad and literally turned blue. They looked, it was really creepy. And once that happens, some of that isn't reversible. Heavy metals.
With carbon-60?
Carbon-60, again, who knows what they're putting into it. How about I sold as a ruse the fluorine water, and in fact what I did is I put deuterium inside it. Now I have a little button I could push, like in the Star Trek movie where you disappear. I would let the buyer beware, and if you're going to do some of these kinds of things, make them yourself. Actually, what is actually healing you is not the fluorine water or the colloidal silver or the turpentine. It's more likely your belief in them. And that's where I'm writing in my field now on the power of belief and how I think placebo is resulting in 70% of healing, not 10. I think that you personally know more about what's going on in your body than your doctor. And that is how that all works. And I think that medicine is broken. And I think that it's time you take responsibility for your own health. Because one size does not fit all, and we're all uniquely different.
Can you give us a 10-second answer to what the definition of monatomic is?
Single molecule.
Mm-hmm. So just silver, nothing else.
Colloidal.
Pure.
Yeah. And colloidal is a grouping, like water. Willard water over water.
Very good. Dr. Richard Allen Miller, RichardAlanMiller.com. Rick, thanks so much for being with us. Class, above all, honesty and integrity. What happens next is up to you.